Welcome to the session on Buddhism. In this session on Buddhism, we shall take up the study of the life and contributions of Gautama the Buddha, who is venerated as the enlightened source of wisdom and inspiration, not only for his times, but for the generations to come. His place in classical Indian philosophy is among the heterodox thinkers because Buddhism does not accept the authority of the Vedas in metaphysical matters like the identity and distinctness of the self or soul. Introduction to the system. Buddhism was founded by Gautama the Buddha. It followed his enlightenment approximately in 534 BC. Gautama was born to Mayavadi and King Shuddhodhan of Sankhya dynasty of South Nepal. His original name was Siddhartha. In the early 16 years of his life, he was educated in state administration and military science. Later, he was married to Yashodhara. After his marriage, he looked after the state affairs. Since his childhood, Siddhartha had shown obvious compassion to those suffering outside the palace. Even though Siddhartha's father had tried to give him all kinds of comforts, he was inclined more to the life of renunciation than to the luxuries and the worldly pleasures in the palace. Whenever he visited the different parts of the city in the royal chariot, he came across the painful scenes of the old and the sick, the bereavement of death and the like. These experiences were shocking to the young Siddhartha. Maybe after thinking for so many days and nights, he left his family and kingdom in search of ways of deliverance from the miseries of the world, and he went under the shelter of some spiritual teachers. He practiced yoga and spiritual techniques for a long time, but it was not easy for Siddhartha to understand the secret of human miseries, life and death. At last, Gautama went through penance in Gaya under the Bodhi tree for quite a long period. This long course of meditative sitting had been rewarded with what is today referred to as Bodhodaya or enlightenment. In the introduction of 366 readings from Buddhism, Robert Ware says, to quote, "Although commonly referred to as Buddha, he saw himself as one of the countless enlightened teachers who appear in every age and in every society." Unquote. After attaining enlightenment, Buddha left the Bodhi tree and went to Kashi. At Sarnath in Kashi, he delivered his first sermons before his 5 disciples. These sermons are known as Dharmachakra Pravartana Sutra, and the Lord Buddha sent his disciples to different parts of the world in order to propagate his teachings. R. Puligandala observes, from then until his death in 483 BC, at the ripe age of 80, Gautama traveled untiringly, teaching his message to men and women, irrespective of caste, color, and station in life. In course of time, Buddha's message gave rise to Buddhism as a religion and a philosophy which spread far and wide to Ceylon, Burma, Thailand, China, and Mongolia in the north. Now we'll go to the literature on Buddhism. Buddhist literature is vast and rich, but Lord Buddha did not write any book of his own. His disciples have compiled his teachings in the form of books. So, a huge literature related to Buddhism is available today. Like all other teachers in ancient times, Buddha teaches orally. usually in the form of a sermon or dialogue. Buddhist literature is customarily divided into two parts, Hinayana and Mahayana. The Hinayana texts are written in Pali language and the Mahayana texts are in Sanskrit. The basic text of Hinayana literature are known as a Pali canon and called Tripitaka, meaning three baskets. The Pali canon was composed long after the death of Buddha and is originally regarded as the original and authentic teachings of Buddha as reported by his intimate disciples. The first basket is known as Vinaya Pitaka, which deals with the rules of conduct and the disciples' order or sanghas or the monastic community. The second, the Sattapitaka, which is also known as Nikayas, is a collection of sayings, sermons and dialogues of Buddha. The last and the third basket is Abhidhamma Pitaka, which contains discussions on philosophical matters. There are many other significant words like Vishuddhimagga or the path of purification, Digha Nagaya or the long discourse of Buddha, and Samyukta Nikaya or the connected discourses of Buddha and the innumerable commentaries on Tripitaka. Dr. Radhakrishnan in his Indian philosophy narrates the formation of the three Pitakas as follows. For an account of early Buddhism, we have to depend on the Pitakas or the baskets of the laws. They are probably compiled and completed before 241 BC when the third council was held. They were undoubtedly the earliest and the most authoritative account of Buddha's teachings now in existence. The Mahayana literature is vaster and more prolific. During the long period of development, the disseminations of Buddhism beyond the borders of India, many of the Mahayana texts were translated from Sanskrit to Tibetan and Chinese. The important Mahayana text is Prajna Parimita Sutra. Now we will discuss the four noble truths of Buddhism. For the disciples and the various Buddhist sects, Buddha was not only a teacher of great sermons, but also a guide in matters of practical life. His emphasis was on the way to conquer the miseries and sufferings in our day-to-day life rather than an abstract philosophical inquiries. Hence, many is regarded Buddha as primarily as an ethical teacher and not a metaphysician. For Buddha, the most urgent task is to lead man out of suffering and distress. So, in Indian tradition, Buddha is often described as a great physician who had developed a clear-cut way to diagnose and treat the ailments of a human mind to pave the way for harmonious living in this world. According to Buddha, the duty of a philosopher is not to indulge in discussions on the pains of human beings, but to do whatever is necessary to heal the pain. When we find a person suffering, the first thing for us to do is to alleviate his or her pain rather than brooding over the origin and cause of the pain. Similarly, as humanity is facing problems one by one, it would not be fair or useful to go on asking the metaphysical questions like, is the world eternal? Is it infinite or finite? Is there a God? That is why Buddha insisted on realizing the basic truth, Sarvam Dukkha. The practical teaching of Buddha are summarized into four noble truths or Arya Satyas. Here you see the account of four noble truths given in Mahavagga. There are four noble truths. The first noble truth is suffering. Birth is suffering, decay is suffering, Illness is suffering and death is suffering. The presence of objects we hate is suffering. Separation from objects we love is suffering. Not obtaining what we desire is suffering. In short, every form of attachment leads to suffering. The second noble truth is the cause of suffering. Desire for pleasure, desire for existence, and desire for wealth cause suffering. The third noble truth is cessation of suffering. The cessation of desire, which consists in the absence of all attachment, leads to the cessation of suffering. The fourth noble truth is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. This is the eightfold path of right vision, right purpose, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right awareness, and right concentration. This passage will give us a clear picture of Buddha's concern for human predicament in this world of persisting confusions, anxieties, and challenges. It contains the diagnosis of human condition and the means to improve it. Now we shall discuss the specific components of Buddhist doctrine of the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is there is suffering. According to Buddha, life is full of misery and pain. Birth is attended with pain, decay and desire, which are painful. Union with the unpleasant is painful, and craving that is unsatisfied, and that too is painful. Even the so-called pleasures are only temporary states that will ultimately end in pain. That there is suffering in this world is a fact of common experience. Poverty, disease, old age, death, anxieties and conflicts are quite widespread in this world. That life is full of misery is a fact that no one can deny. R. Puligandala explains the concept of dukkha or suffering thus. To quote, the term dukkha is often rendered as a suffering in the sense of a physical and psychological pain, but more currently, dukkha is to be understood in its fundamental meaning, namely impermanence or anitya. Impermanence is the basic characteristic of all existence, animate and inanimate. If we look around, we find all things are changing. There seems to be nothing permanent within, man or without. According to Buddha, it is this impermanence that is the foundation of all suffering. For Buddha, impermanence is the basic trait of reality as we experience it with our senses and mind. And whenever there is impermanence, there is suffering. The first noble truth is that existence is dukkha or impermanence, out of which arises all suffering. Now we move on to the second noble truth. The fact that suffering has attachment to a cycle of birth and death or samsara is recognized by all Indian philosophers, but the diagnosis of this malady is not always the same. The origin of life's evil, is explained by Buddha in the light of his special conception of natural causation or praditya samutpada. According to Buddha, everything has a cause. Nothing comes out of nothing. The existence of everything depends upon its causes and conditions. Everything in this world is conditional, relative, and related. As suffering is a fact, it must have a cause. It must depend upon certain conditions. Suffering is not a chance occurrence, but brought about by certain conditions which are inseparable from existence itself. If suffering is uncaused, then there can be no way of eliminating it. The whole of existence, as we experience it, is a vast network of causes and effects. This fact is expressed by the formula, this rising that rises, this ceasing to be that ceases to be, or this phenomenon is dependent upon that phenomenon. Nothing exists unconditionally and absolutely. Everything depends upon something other than itself. The doctrine that everything depends upon other things is known as the doctrine of dependent origination or Praditya Samutpadavada. In the light of the doctrine of dependent origination, the second noble truth may be stated as suffering has a cause. The various conditions which produce suffering are expressed by Buddha in the form of a chain of cause and effect. The doctrine of Praditya Samutpada or the theory of dependent origination is the foundation of all the teachings of Buddha. It is contained in the second noble truth which gives us the cause of suffering, and in the third noble truth which shows the cessation of suffering. Suffering is samsara and the cessation of suffering is nirvana. Both are only the two aspects of the same reality. Praditya Samutpada, viewed from the point of view of relativity or samsara, and while viewed from the point of view of reality, it is nirvana. Why do we suffer from old age and death? Because we are born. Why we are born? Because there is a will to be born. Why should there be this will? Because we cling to the objects of this world. Why do we have this clinging? Because we crave for enjoy the objects of this world. Why do we have this craving? Because of our contact with the sense objects. Why do we have this contact? Because of sense organs. Why do we have sense organs? Because of a psychophysical organism. Why do we have this organism? Because of initial consciousness of the embryo. Why do we have this consciousness? Because of karma. Why do we have this karma? Because of ignorance. Hence, ignorance is the root cause of suffering. Thus, we have 12 wings of the causal wheel of dependent origination. We will name them as follows: 1. Ignorance, 2. Karma, 3. Consciousness, 4. Psychophysical organism, 5. Sense organs, 6. Sense object contact, 7. Sense experience, 8. Thirst for enjoyment, 9. Clinging to enjoyment, 10. Will to be born, 11. Birth, and 12. Old age and death. Of these 12 links, the first 2 are related to the past life, the last 2 to the future life, and the rest to the present life. This is the cycle of birth and death. Death is only the beginning of a new life. This cycle can be destroyed only by right knowledge. So, knowledge is the sole means of liberation. Now, we will try to explain the third noble truth. After explaining the cause of suffering, Buddha proceeds to prescribe the way to eliminate it. This brings us to the third noble truth. It may be stated thus: since suffering is caused, it can be eliminated by eliminating its cause. It is to be removed in order to make pain, misery, sorrow, and suffering cease. According to Buddha, ignorance is the fundamental thing that causes all suffering. Hence, ignorance is to be removed in order to attain liberation from the chain of causation behind all suffering. But how is ignorance to be conquered? According to Buddha, we can conquer ignorance by clearly comprehending the nature of existence as impermanent and by acquiring perfect insight and wisdom leading to non-attachment, tranquility, and freedom. This the way of attaining nirvana. In order to attain nirvana, we have to follow the eightfold path prescribed in the fourth noble truth. Now, we will discuss the fourth noble truth. The eightfold path or Ashtanga Marga is the Buddhist way of living in harmony and peace. It is the perfect blending of knowledge, conduct, and action. Followers of this eightfold path will attain nirvana. The path recommended by Buddha consists of 8 steps or rules and is therefore called the eightfold path. The Eightfold Noble Path thus gives a nutshell the essentials of Buddhist ethics and the way of life. This path is open to all, monks as well as laymen. Ashtanga Marga or the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is contained in the fourth noble truth of Buddha. The Buddha said, there are two extremes, O monks, from which he who leads a religious life must abstain. One is life of pleasure, devoted to desire and enjoyment, that is base, unworthy, unreal, and unspiritual. The perfect one, O monk, is removed from both these extremes and has discovered the way which lies between them. The middle way enlightens the eyes, enlightens the mind, which leads to rest, to knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana. These words of Buddha are the basis of Eightfold Path. It consists of the following prescriptions. Right view. Wrong view about the self and the world is the root cause of all suffering. It is natural that the first step to the moral reformation should be acquisition of the right view or knowledge of the truth. So, this is the discipline which enables one to see the true nature of the world of experience as being sorrowful, impermanent, etc. A right view reveals the four noble truths. Second is right-mindedness. This refers to the right motivation, removing all prejudices and evil intentions from one's own thought. One must cultivate a friendly attitude towards all sentient beings. One should cultivate benevolent thoughts, thoughts of compassion, thoughts of sympathy, etc. The third is right speech. One should kind and truthful in speech, which shall never to hurt others. Buddhism preaches better than 1,000 utterances composed of meaningless words is one sensible word, hearing which one becomes peaceful. The fourth Eightfold Truth is right action. Evil deeds should be avoided. Right deeds do not result in sorrow. One should practice restraint and virtue, and one should meaningfully avoid doing wrong. Right livelihood. The means of living that one adopts should be in agreement with the laws of morality. One should keep away from all kinds of actions that cause injury to any of the living beings. The next Eightfold Path is right effort. According to Buddha, self-effort is the utmost necessity. Through right efforts, passions should be controlled. Without right effort, one cannot gain enlightenment. The next principle of Eightfold Path is right thought. This literally means good memory, not merely the faculty of remembering the past, but also being alert and watchful and in complete self-possession. It is through right mindfulness that one can control one's acts, feelings, and thoughts. Right concentration is the next principle. This is the practice of a meditation essential for attaining the final wisdom. Keeping oneself to the worth of the inner world will enable him or her to develop the power of concentration. Hence, in Buddhism, meditation is indeed a significant stage in the path to nirvana. Now, we will summarize the lecture. The schools of Indian philosophy are classified into heterodox schools and orthodox schools. Buddhism is one of the heterodox schools in Indian philosophy. Buddhism is both a philosophy and a religion. The main teachings of Buddhism are the Four Noble Truths, the theory of dependent origination, and the Eightfold Path for the attainment of nirvana. The theory of Four Noble Truths explains the nature of samsara and nirvana. Praditya Samutpada, or the theory of dependent origination, explains the nature of causality in this universe. This theory says that everything has a cause and nothing comes out of nothing. If the cause of a sorrow is discovered, then its cure becomes possible. The fourth noble truth contains a dukkha nirodha marga. Buddha prescribes the Ashtanga marga for the removal of sorrow. Buddhism is divided into many philosophical schools and has a vast philosophical literature. Mahayana and Hinayana are the two main streams of Buddhism. Now we will take up some of the assignments. 1. Give a short account of teaching of Buddha. 2. Explain the concept of Praditya Samutpada in Buddhism. 3. Describe the Ashtanga Marga taught by Buddha. Give an account of the Buddhist literature. 5. Buddhism is a religion without God. Explain. 6. 4 noble truths are the foundations of Buddhism. Justify this statement. 7. How second noble truth related to theory of dependent origination. Explain. We can have the following references for further studies. Indian Philosophy, Volume 1, Dr. S. Radhakrishnan. A History of Indian Philosophy, Dasgupta Surendranath. History of Pre-Buddhistic Philosophy, B.M. Baru. 2500 Years of Buddhism by P.V. Bapat. History of Buddhist Thought by E.J. Thomas. Philosophy of Buddha by A.J. Baum. Thank you for listening to this session. Thanks.